planning, let's talk about how Zach and Kendra planned this business out and pulled it off. So, list of assumptions about the business that we went over in the much ado about something talk. Consumers want an artisanal ice cream experience. This does not need proving, and the great thing about a lot of small businesses is that they're based on models that have already been proven elsewhere, and this was the case with artisanal ice cream. There are national case studies to look at. There are trends from the National Restaurant Association. They talk to peers like Zach's sister-in-law. Santa Cruz is an adequately large market. That does need to be proven. They decided to do this with their first shop. They could have gone to the farmer's market and tried that out, but they were going to commit themselves full-time to the thing. They wanted to go a bit bigger than that. They built one store, though, not 2 or 3 or 4, before they had proven the idea out there. I think this is very common for small businesses. You know that the model can work. It's worked many, probably hundreds of thousands, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of other places, but you need to make sure that your execution in your market is going to work. I think that's pretty typical. Customers do not require 31 flavors on a regular basis. A fresh stable of flavors is preferable, one that rotates. This idea needs proving. This was not necessarily something that every other artisanal ice cream business that they were able to look at had done. And their experiment was really the first shop here. Penny can provide artisanal experiences at a cost that they can make a business out of. This they also needed to prove at the first shop, but since their sales numbers were great, this was something they just ended up de facto proving very early on. High-end ice cream is a small luxury that performs well in bad macroeconomic environments. This doesn't need proving because they had access to historical data about this that they were able to access, and the proposition was sort of available to them before they even started. And those are really the key assumptions for the first iteration of the Penny. Let's take a look at the business model canvas that we described in Much Ado About Something. Customer segments. These map to the personas that we described earlier. Epicureans, downtown patrons, students, visitors. Value propositions. A gourmet food experience is really the key proposition, and participation in the sustainable foods community. They are not using channels, no resale. Again, that's because they've identified that the in-store experience, the description of where the product came from, what it's like, almost like the experience you have with a wine sommelier, but not as snooty. That's a key part of the overall product experience. Personal assistance is the customer relationship they have, and again, that's important. They have someone at the counter talking to the customer, one of their own people. Revenue streams. They have retail sales. They also have a catering business because that affords them the ability to provide the same general type of experience. Key resources. They've got the ice cream artisans. They've got this concierge staff that's able to talk about the product. And then they are scaling up the business. Cost of goods and labor are really their big variable costs. So process infrastructure to make that more efficient is actually a really key resource for them. Key activities are culinary innovation and this participation in the sustainable food-based community organizations that educate about the artisanal food movement, the organic foods movement. This entails events, education, initiatives that they participate in. Key partners, farmers, foragers, artisans. These are people that supply inputs to the Penny that they use to make ice cream. Cost structure. They have a pseudo fixed cost of labor in the short term, but that really is variable relatively frequently, especially in a growth environment. Their materials, so cost of goods and labor, and then they have a fixed cost element of plant, which is the store. They began operations in August of 2010, and in 2011 they hit their 2014 sales target. So this quickly went from a business of being a startup in the sense of finding a product market fit to a business that had to figure out how to scale and apply a successful recipe astutely for growth. And that meant managing cost of goods, managing labor, identifying sites. On financing, they did friends and family, and they were able to get a small business loan from Lighthouse Bank here in Santa Cruz. And on earnings, they were break even in 2010, and that was an interesting feature of the business because Zach and Kendra were themselves able to do most of the work. So the minimum efficient scale for the business was pretty low. It's a little different than most high-tech businesses. And they had 16 months to reasonable visibility. Visibility is important because that means you can bank the business. You have an idea about how it's going to perform economically. So if you want a model, there's one on /FinPlan. It'll be up by 8/22. That's on alexandercowan.com. So let's go through this iterative management idea with the Penny. So they had the idea that they wanted to participate in the artisanal food movement, and their thing was ice cream. A storefront business was that a storefront business in Santa Cruz had an adequately large market and was a scalable proposition was their key hypothesis. The store was the prototype in the experiment. Operating results of the store proved the proposition, and rather than revising, they're persevering, scaling up. They've opened a store on Beach Street, and they're opening another store on 41st Avenue in Capitola, California.